Welcome everyone to the YOSHICAST. I'm Yoshi. Today is Tuesday, August 14th, 2018, and this is episode 13 of Bag and Board. Yoshi! Thanks for joining me this week, everybody. I've got some great books to bag and board this week. I'm also going to announce the winner for the contest that I announced back in episode 11, and we're going to kick things off. I've got some sad news with a little bit of good news at the end. But one of my comic book stores here in Bellingham, Washington is closing its doors. Moonbase, located in Fairhaven, not too far from where I'm at, is closing their doors. They've been open for a year and they gave it a good go, but it doesn't look like things are working out. I really loved going to this store, mostly for their back issues. They always had a really good selection of back issues that were different than what I could find at the comics place in downtown Bellingham. The good news about the sad news is that Moonbase and the comics place are owned by the same person, so everything at Moonbase is going to migrate its way over to the comics place. But as my own little goodbye to the Moonbase, the books I'll be bagging and boarding this week are books I picked up at the Moonbase. I didn't pick them up from the comics place or get them online or anything. These were all picked up at the Moonbase. And I'm pretty excited to go over these because I found some really nice looking books. So the very first book I have to share with you that I purchased from Moonbase is Batman Legends of the Dark Knight, issue number 50. This book caught my eye. It is absolutely gorgeous. Let's go ahead and move it to the other camera here. This book is just beautiful. I just love the art on it. I believe the cover was done by Brian Boland. And it's great. You got the crazy Joker smiles on both Joker and the cat, and Batman looming in the background. I'm gonna go ahead and talk about this book because I went ahead and read it before I decided to sit down and record here. So I'm gonna spoil this, and if you don't want to be spoiled, just hit mute on the video, and you can watch me bag and board it, and then just unmute me when I switch to the next book. So this is a thicker comic. It came out in 1993, I believe, is the year I read, and the art in this book, the art on this cover is just beautiful. Again, like it was the art that grabbed my eye. I had to have this once I saw it. I have read Legends of the Dark Knight before. I've read issues 1 through 5, I believe it was. That's what I have in my personal collection. I never read past that, and I don't know why I never read past it, honestly. I really felt like the first time I saw the first Nolan Batman film, I immediately thought of the first 5 issues of Legends of the Dark Knight I had read, and thought that he must have gotten a lot of inspiration from this book, because it just reminded me of this book so much. So this was an interesting issue. I don't know if the Joker makes an appearance in any of the earlier issues of Legends of the Dark Knight, but this is kind of what this is the story of Batman meeting the Joker for the first time. It was a very well told story. You definitely get to see Batman at his best. I don't know if we see the Joker at his best, but it was really good. I believe the title of the story is From the Early Days, and it kicks off with the Joker meeting with some mob bosses in an old rundown diner. And in typical Joker fashion, he's being very elaborate in explaining what his master plan is going to be, which is basically threatening to kill famous, affluent people around Gotham unless his demands for ransom are met. And even after they're met, he plans to kill them anyways. Batman interrupts this first meeting. He immediately goes after the mob bosses and takes out the mob bosses, and doesn't realize who the Joker is because he's never met him before. And the Joker gives him a lame story like, yeah, they captured me from the circus and they were holding me here, and now I got to go call my boss because he's a real stickler, and I got to get out of here, but thank you for saving me. And the Joker runs off. And where he retreats to is a trailer park that a house, one of the trailers he lives in with a cousin of his who's kind of an idiot savant. He's not intellectually smarter than an 8-year-old unless we're talking chemistry, and then you can't match toes with him. He is just genius. And what his cousin does is makes a potion, a serum, whatever you want to call it, that kills people, but it kills them with that smile, with that grin. It felt really like Tim Burton's 1989 Batman and Joker from that movie, because the Joker added a mixture of chemical to cosmetics that caused people to die with a smile on their face, and that's what we have here. That seems to be the same shtick going on with this story. It took me a minute to get past that, and once I got past that, I really did enjoy this story, because we really do see Batman at his best. You see where he has to be a master of disguise at some points, where he has to be a super sleuth detective at others. The way he banters back and forth with Commissioner Gordon is great. It really is a good story from the Batman perspective of it. And from the Joker perspective, it's not bad either. You just got to get past that. It feels like they're stealing the gimmick from Tim Burton's 1989 movie. And here's the book in the Mylar, and it really does look good. It does have one small spine, not a small one, but it does have a spine ding here, nick, whatever you want to call it. But it looks great. It's a great book. What I did, I noticed on the first page of this, they give a little bit of credit behind the inspiration of the story to Bill Finger, who we now know was the primary Imagineer, the primary writer, the primary creator of Batman. I know that Bill Finger or Bob Kane had something to do with it, but it seems lately that we've learned a lot more about Bill Finger, and that he was way more instrumental in Batman's mythos and creation, and the villains for that matter. So it's a really good book. It's a long story, and I like that. It fit. It didn't feel like they were dragging anything out. It didn't feel rushed. It didn't feel drug out. It felt really like a solid Batman story. And there are something like, at the end of this, there are 15 pinup pictures done by 15 different artists. Which I thought was cool. It is pretty neat. My favorite of these was by, I think it's Bob Wayek and Walt Simonson. That was my favorite of the pinups. You got some by Jim Lee. You got one by Jim Lee and other artists. That alone is pretty neat about this book. But yeah, I bought this basically just seeing the cover art. I had to have this guy because it just was so eye-catching and so beautiful. And yeah. It's Legends of the Dark Knight, issue 50, bagged and boarded in Mylar. Looks awesome, guys. Now, next up, I read this book too, so we're going to talk about it and spoil it a little bit. I think it's okay to spoil this. I have The Unexpected, which is a horror book. And I got this because I've recently really gotten into Ice Cream Man and Grim Tales of Terror. And I wanted to try some of the older horror books that were out there. So this is my first dive into older horror. And the stories in this, compared to Grim Tales of Terror and Ice Cream Man, I feel are longer. And I say stories because there are 3 stories in this book, which is pretty impressive for 20 cents. I obviously paid more than that. But the art was good. I do really enjoy this cover. It really makes you think and wonder. But yeah, so we're going to go ahead and talk about this book a little bit. The first story is Fear. Fear is a Nameless Voice, and that is what we're depicting here on the cover. It is about a very famous ventriloquist who has been performing publicly for a while. He has tons of dolls that he performs with, and the book kind of starts off with him accusing his assistant of sleeping with his wife. And that is backed up by his dolls, because his dolls start talking while he confronts his assistant and what he did. And the assistant denies it, and the dolls call him a liar, basically. And one of the dolls, who looks like an executioner here, ends up killing his assistant, and he takes him down to the very bottom of the playhouse that they've been performing at, and throws him in a pit, with the intention of doing the same thing with his wife after the show that evening. So his wife is with him, they're performing on the stage, and he kind of cracks mid-performance. The dolls start talking out of character, start warning her that his husband is about to kill her, along with her lover, which is never confirmed whether they're lovers or not in the story. So that adds a little bit more to the depth of the story, honestly. Basically, the guy, he can't control his dolls talking anymore. Like, he's doing the ventriloquism. It seems pretty obvious he's still doing it, but he has no control over it anymore. He's basically lost it. And in an attempt to stop the voices from talking and pretty much ratting him out for killing his assistant, he smashes his dolls, but they still continue to talk. And he basically gets sent to an insane asylum at the very end of it. And that's that story. The second story is What Evil Lurks in the Night. This is an interesting story about a night watchman in a cemetery who discovers a guy who looks oddly like himself, basically looting graves and stealing all of the jewelry or watches or what have you that have been buried with people's loved ones. And for some reason, this watchman decides to help this guy that looks oddly like him, to find a way to get him out of the cemetery, away from people, basically sneak him away from this town into another town where nobody knows him, and so he won't get caught. And the guy ends up nearly getting killed in this new city, and that wakes up the first guy from a dream. And you have the realization that they're one and the same. He was dreaming about himself, and he's stricken with such guilt that he ends up basically digging up all of the graves he had dug up before, putting everybody's jewelry and possessions back, and filling them up. And that's the end of that story. The last story is called Panic Grips Manhattan. This was kind of the most sci-fi story of the three. A man is out of work. His factory shut down. He's been out of work for months. So is a lot of people in Manhattan. He and his family have run out of money. He's desperate, and he meets a guy for a job. And what this guy wants to do is pay him $10,000 to let him basically do a lobotomy on his brain. He wants to add a computer to his brain. This book was published in 1973, so let's keep that in perspective here. He's a world famous surgeon. He wants to give the guy $10,000 to perform this procedure, to add a computer to his brain. His wife is reluctant, doesn't want him to do it. The guy runs off, sneaks away, does it anyways. And when he comes to after the surgery, the doctor figures, all right, it's time to program you. Let's start reading a book on advanced mathematics. And the guy kind of snaps during the reading of this, because the guy wanted him to read 50 pages a day, and he kind of snaps just at the start of it, and he runs off, and he starts committing crimes and murders, and basically goes homicidal, and ends up staying with his wife, being very loving and caring, but he has to go out and kill. And the doctor doesn't realize that this is what the man is doing, but is worried that his wife is going to put two and two together and realize that her husband is doing these gruesome crimes throughout Manhattan. So he goes to kill her to keep her from talking. Doesn't realize that her husband is there. Husband kind of runs across the room and tackles him, and they both fall out of a window and die. And that's how that story ends. You know, in 1973, 20 cents, you definitely get your money's worth. I felt like at $5, I think it was, I paid for this, I got my money's worth. I was not as entertained as I am with Ice Cream Man or Grim Tales of Terror, but this is one issue I have tried of a vintage scary story, horror story, whatever you want to call it. And I'm going to give it another shot. I'm going to try a few more of these books. Maybe not all of them will be the unexpected, but I will try some and see what happens. Because, I don't know, I've got this bug, I've got this itch. I'm definitely going to read more Grim Tales of Terror and more Ice Cream Man, but I want more to read. So I'm gonna try picking up a few more of these back issues and see what I think. Yeah, and go from there. So this is The Unexpected, issue 143. It came out in 1973. And the blacks look black, the reds look red. The detail on this guy, let me put it back under the other camera. The detail on this guy, whoever did this cover is insane. This is just gorgeous art. Absolutely gorgeous art. Okay, next up. Again, picked up all of these books from Moonbase. The next 3 books I have are all for helping me complete my Punisher reading order. Here we have Venom #1, Venom Funeral Pyre, featuring the Punisher. Now, the Punisher, I believe, is featured in the first 3 issues of this book, and I was able to find the first one, so I got to hunt down the other 2. And so this is the first issue of Venom Funeral Pyre, featuring the Punisher. Next up, I got a book that came unbagged and boarded. We have The Amazing Spider-Man issue 355. It's obvious from the cover, Punisher's in this one as well, with an ad for Hook on the back. And here is The Amazing Spider-Man 355. Punisher is one of the guest stars in this book. And it is not in the best shape, but you know, honest to God, I know I say this a lot. I know I sound like a broken record, but trust me, this Mylar makes this book that was pretty much unpresentable look presentable now. It's amazing stuff. This is probably also something to point out. You know, if you're buying an older book, especially one that's wrapped in Mylar, ask the person selling it to you if it can be taken out of the bag to be looked at. Make sure you're getting what you pay for. So yeah, Amazing Spider-Man 355. My last book this week, before we go on to find out who our contest winner is The Amazing Spider-Man 354. Oh, the one previous to that. I should have switched the order. 354. We've got Nova, Moon Knight, but Nova and Night Thrasher on the cover. This one does have the Punisher in it, and that's why I picked it up. And this is The Amazing Spider-Man 354. Something I noticed while I was bagging and boarding this beast is Spider-Man here in the character box. This is freaking awesome. I've never seen something like this before. Spider-Man is just so... He's outside the box. He's bleeding over. I love this kind of stuff, like where it goes over or interacts with the logo, and they brought that whole gimmick over to the character box, and that is great. I absolutely love that. I'm gonna have to remember this when I go for another sketch cover, see if I can somehow have that gimmick where it bleeds outside the box happen, because that is super cool. I love that. That just made this book for me. I mean, this book is not in good shape. You can see it here. It's obvious, but that is wicked cool. I really dig that. Okay, so let's go on to our contest giveaway, shall we? So this contest giveaway is for 3 comic books, and I mentioned this back in episode 11. Action Comics #1, the blank cover variant, Captain America, a blank cover variant, and Mira, issue 1, the Emerald City Comic Con exclusive foil cover. And I got an overwhelming number of responses for this contest from people telling me they were not entering. And honestly, that made me happy. Every single one of these people who contacted me who said they were not entering were saying that, I want you to know we heard about the contest, and we think that's great that you're doing that. And even though we love comic books, not necessarily a fan of any of the books I was giving away in my giveaway, and they wanted to make sure that people who really wanted these books stood a better chance of winning this. So I am completely humbled and thrilled by that. And I want to thank every one of you who sent me a message through the various social medias and text messages just to say that. I really appreciate that. Thank you. I think that says a lot about the people who watch me on this channel, and that they're just good folks. We're all good folks, and we're all enjoying this hobby. So I thank you very much. What that means is that 2 people who really wanted these comic books have entered into this contest by sending me a selfie of them with either their favorite comic or comics, just showing me what they really liked, and that's cool. So we're going to use my phone assistant Suri here to determine who the winner is going to be. Suri, please pick a number between 1 and 2.
That would be 1.
All right, and if I look at my list here, Chris Kersey is the winner of this contest. Chris, I'm going to go ahead and contact you on the platform you contacted me on, and we'll exchange addresses, and I'll get those books out to you just as soon as I can. So thank you guys for entering, and thank you guys who didn't enter. That was super awesome too. And take care of yourselves, and I'll catch you in the next video.